Hello, everyone, and welcome to DisrupTV. My name is Bala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce and co-host of DisrupTV. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send questions to our guests using hashtag DisrupTV. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's my privilege to introduce my co-host, Ray Wong, best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business. He's a Forbes, HBR, and ZDNet contributor and co-founder, CEO of Constellation Research. You can follow Ray on Twitter at RWANG0. Hello, Ray.
Hello, and I'm here with my co-host, Bala Afshar, and as he mentioned, but what he didn't say, he is now the #1 CIO influencer, according to many surveys, big contributor Huffington Post, one of the top influencers just not only in CIOs and CMOs, and here with me today, but more importantly, we have a better and more interesting guest than ourselves. I'll let you do the intros.
Just before we started, you had pretty much summarized as one of the smartest guys we know in government, and Alex is senior analyst at Sunlight Foundation, Alex Howard. Previously, Alex was the first senior editor for Technology and Society at the Huffington Post and a columnist for Tech Republic, and a contributor to Tech President, among many other publications. As a consultant, moderator, researcher, Alex has been recognized twice by the Washington Magazine as one of Washington's tech titans. Ray, you and I have never had that as a title, which called him respected trend spotter and chronicler of government's use of new media. Alex has appeared on the air as an analyst on NPR, Al Jazeera English in America, Washington Post, and many other news outlets. From 2010 to 13, Alex was Washington correspondent for Radar at O'Reilly Media. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Digifile, DIGIPHILE. Welcome, Alex, to the show.
Wow, thank you. Can I use my publicist? That was amazing.
Bala has the best intros in the industry, is all I can say.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're not even following Alex at all, I mean, I'm sure everybody's already following, but if you haven't, it's a good point. But hey, Alex, you know, you joined the Sunlight Foundation. I was really excited when that happened. I think a lot of folks might not know what the Sunlight Foundation does, what its mission is about. Can you start by telling us a little bit about, you know, why and what it's all about?
Sure. So the Sunlight Foundation is decades old. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan, open government advocate here in Washington, D.C. Founded at the end of the Bush presidency and then flourished and has had an impact upon the nation's thinking on open government, what it means to use technology in government. They use tools of technology, data, journalism, and then direct advocacy and policy work as well, and has helped to get lots of good laws through and some not so good laws not passed. I was happy to join on, let's see, April of this year. It feels like a lot longer than that in 2016.
It's been a long year for.
Yep, and pick up a lot of the pieces of federal policy and keep carrying on, you know, the Sunlight flag, so to speak, in Congress and on the Hill and the White House and all around the world, because I've really gotten an opportunity to meet a lot of Sunlight's readers and their global community, which they built up over the past 10 years. And you know, now we're still doing our work here in DC and looking at the Trump presidency and thinking about what it'll mean for transparency and accountability in Washington.
Well, you've been very busy.
We're going to be busy either way, put it that way.
Yes. Well, the concepts of open data has historical roots that stretch back to the nation's foundings. What is open government data and why is it so important?
So it's useful to think about this as just information that's produced for a government of the people and given back to the people. So, I mean, data that, you know, can be represented in anything. In government, you usually think about documents, but in the digital age, you guys think about data all the time. You know, that more elemental bit of the chain, from raw data to structured data to information to knowledge, you know, like that. And it's the principle that in our government, things that we pay for should be open to us unless there's a really strong reason for it. And the Freedom of Information Act's been around for the past 50 years, and that gets that to that point, that you have the right to request anything, and then we've got 9 exemptions to say we shouldn't give it to you: privacy, security, some kind of deliberative exemptions, etc. Open data is getting even to something more elemental about how we think about a democracy that comes out of the Enlightenment. You know, the kind of those philosophers and who were thinking about what a government of the people, by the people, for the people should be, and that which is produced with the people's funds, their taxpayer dollars, should be available to them. That could be research, it could be what a statistics agency pulls along, it could be weather data, which gives us the forecasts, or climate data that tells us what's happening. Any kind of data taken from cameras up in space, incredibly useful stuff from those telescopes now. All kinds of thermal data about how current data, wind data, that's something we started collecting back in the 18th century. You know, the Naval Observatory started collecting that. But it really goes back to the nation's founding, to the Constitution, and the instruction from the Constitutional Congress that there should be a census. And that census would go out and collect information about the people and then release that back to them. So that's the original kind of founding of open data in the United States, is the enumeration of the census and then its publication for everyone to see. And everything else has sort of flowed from that. I think it gets a lot of grounding in the last 10, 15 years because people really popularized open data as a concept in the late 2000s with a meeting at Sebastopol, California, that was convened by my old boss, Tim O'Reilly, and about 30 other people who came up with the idea of this like open government data, government of the people, by the people, should be open and structured and machine readable to the people, and brought in this wave of enthusiasm for opening it up back in 2009 and 10, and now we're looking back at a presidency and seeing what happened.
Wow. Actually, there are some great things there. And you actually touched upon these. I mean, you guys came up with, I think it was like 10 principles for opening up government information and making sure that that's in place. And, and those were built in, way before this election, 6, 7 years ago. And what's exciting about that is you have a bunch of them. There's one that really caught my eye that I thought was interesting, was really the fact about non-discrimination. But can you talk about these different principles and then focus in on non-discrimination and talk about what those barriers could be for people trying to get access to the data?
It's an interesting one to zero in on, Ray. I think it's one we'll be thinking a lot about, particularly as the FCC's open internet rules are looked at next year. I know that Congress is looking at whether the net neutrality order is something that should endure in some form. Like what makes sense? There's been a lot of different principles for open government data that have been put out there. The meeting I mentioned in 2007 had 8 of them. I think that if you tick through completeness, primacy, timeliness, ease of access, machine readability, non-discrimination refers to who can access data and how they must do so. Barriers to use of data can include registration or membership requirements. Another barrier is the uses of, quote, walled garden, end quote, which is when only some applications are allowed access to data. At its broadest, non-discriminatory access to data means that any person can access the data at any time without having to identify him or herself or providing justification for doing so. Now,
That's kind of the principles of FOIA as well, if you think about it.
Well, it applies to lots of different things. I mean, the idea with these 10 is that they're universal to all different kinds of data. And here, in this case, non-discrimination, that is a net neutrality principle, that each bit shall be treated the same unless there's some exigency that it needs to be prioritized for. And I think that's what you see in a lot of places. I think in both Europe and the US, people talk about specialized lanes or a fast lane for applications that need to have no latency at all. I think that two-tiered internet is probably likely in a lot of environments. I don't know whether it's ultimately what we'll get here with wireless leapfrog, and it depends what they do with bandwidth, et cetera. But you could read a principle like this to mean that if you're throttling my data, you are breaking a principle for openness, at least if you're not doing it in a transparent and accountable way, which is really why the FCC has been able to fine wireless companies. When they've represented that you have unlimited data, but in actuality, after 5 gigabytes, we've brought you down to a 1/10 of your bandwidth speed or your throughput. I think that order is what gives that force. So in some ways, the FCC has adopted that into how it's regulating the citizen use of data, which in a way might be a good thing.
There was a State of the Union of Open Data 2016 report and talked about the future of open data. Listed 4 categories: low reporting cost, ability to cross-compare data, ability to provide greater predictive analysis, and greater availability of data to various constituencies.
Yeah.
I want to pause there, and then I want to talk about a Pew 2016 research that said 44% of adults get their news from Facebook. And there's been a lot of discussions about fake news.
Yeah.
And when you think of open data and this ability to cross-compare data, where do you see the most important leapfrog innovation in open data that will help bring more accuracy and trust to the data that we consume?
I think we're going to end up seeing more metadata around what we could call content in digital media world, from the business side. And from the writing side, I want to say there's journalism and there's content, but many people feel, content's a form of something that can be shipped around with journalism inside of it or something else. And whatever it is, it's something that ads can be sold against. And I think that people on many sides of the equation want to know how trustworthy whatever is in there is. And there's lots of ways to get to that trust factor, just in the same way as Google gets to the relevancy factor. If I put in this kind of thing and I'm this kind of person with this kind of history, this is likely the idea or the thing or the process that I might be looking for, a personalized result. I think that with news, it's complicated by the fact that if people can self-select news that conforms to their confirmation bias, or even self-select propaganda or fake news that conforms to their bias, then I think the effects of polarization in the electoral context become much more difficult, which is, I think, what we're living through. My feeling in general is that the more that we can add trustworthy signals to individual stories by kind of how they're validated and verified and how that branding conveys that, and the more that we have someone looking at these things to decide whether they get into certain platforms or not, like it or not, that's what the delay is like in a live broadcast. It might be something like that for an ad network eventually.
Yeah.
Then we're going to get into some really dicey places, because a lot of people will justifiably see any kind of regulation or restriction of this stuff as a restriction of speech. So,
are you thinking at some point, leveraging maybe it's deep or machine learning or AI technology, you give a trust score to a person or a piece of content in real time, where you're validating or fact checking in real time, scoring the individuals who contribute to whether it's the social sphere or a publication, whatever it may be?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think you're onto something that already exists. I think we've already built trust graphs by who we follow and who we decide to reshare, and with what kind of validation. If you were able to do a mass study of all Twitter data, if they actually had it in the Library of Congress, we could all just slice it a gazillion different ways. Not the thing. We could already see who's trusted with hard news on Twitter. Like, if someone says something's true, everyone's like, okay, it's true. Yeah. Over time, you could actually get a veracity score. And over time, you could get sentiment. How many times is someone wrong, right? What's your score? What's your predictive validity? We can now keep score in different ways. And you already see this expressed in influencer marketing and affiliate marketing. Brands like the Wirecutter are able to do so well with those 1,000 pages because they're like, we looked at everything, that's the best one, right? Well, if a Wirecutter can do that for products and services, why can't we do that for news and politicians and doctors and everything else that matters? The answer is that data helps us get there, but there's all this other stuff that you have to work out to make it true, and people are clearly willing to believe things that aren't true. So we've got some root causes to address.
And the flip side of that is what the Chinese government is doing with their basically, citizen scores, right?
Social credit?
Social credit.
Yeah, that's the totalitarian version, Ray. We're going to have the democratic version where we have some rules, some regulation, the government being involved in some way. And then you've got the Chinese version, which is a gigantic golden box with trapdoors and monitoring systems throughout the entire cage.
When are we going to make privacy and digital privacy an international human right, man?
People have.
I mean, that's something I would work with you to get through the UN. I mean, to make digital privacy an international human right, and what that means with how that data is being used and how that blocks you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just drop the digital and make
just
privacy
all privacy.
Right, and let's not differentiate anymore. No digital duality. No virtual versus real. Just privacy. I got into this with an Internet Bill of Rights in 2012. I wrote some stuff talking to Darrell Ice and some other people about, because internet freedom was a thing, because it has been on and off, but it was different versions of it were out there. And one of the things that I feel strongly about, because I have a Bill of Rights, is that it should apply to me wherever I am. And we get into an interesting place then, because then we say, well, in American internet companies, should they adopt the Bill of Rights for other countries, or should they, bend the knee, which is what they typically do to enter a country, which Facebook is looking at right now.
Oh yeah, they're doing that.
To build censorship and to enter China. Or you fight and say that these are the democratic principles we fight for our users. And to their credit, Google and Microsoft and Twitter have all stood up for their users here in DC. some of the same people moving around, in fact, have done it.
No,
And,
I think Microsoft has done a really good job. Their legal guy has definitely pushed that pretty hard.
But they fought for, you know, getting rid of gag orders, the constitutionality of court orders, you know, for user information. And I think it's the appropriate thing is for us to all transparently have a discussion about what access law enforcement should have to user data and when.
Now, this actually brings out a good point. I mean, you guys have been spending a lot of time trying to make politics and government more accountable, and you're using a lot of technology tools to do that, right? We've been talking about data, access to that data, how to pull it together, but the piece we didn't really catch in on is, or zero in on, is the community.
Yeah.
Right. You guys have activated, you're not that big of an organization, but you've activated a huge community and ecosystem that shares those principles that can activate something that we're talking about right now about making privacy international human right.
Well, yeah, I think that's about Sunlight. You know, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I feel that every day. I feel the trust in me to do a good job of representing them well here to you and the internet. Is the internet watching? I feel a responsibility to make thoughtful decisions about what we focus on and how I focus on it. And I'm proud that we've done some important things this year together with a lot of the people we stand with here in DC, because this is very much a collaborative enterprise with press and NGOs and government institutions and the public. And I think that Sunlight has stood for really important principles and ideas and civil liberties for the past decade, and I'm very proud to do that here today.
No, it's great. And we had Vince Cerf at our conference talking about the people-centered internet. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of connections coming back to that. It's something we should talk about, you know, definitely in the future.
He's much better dressed than I am. He always shows up in an natty three-piece suit. Three-piece suit.
Well, definitely the best dressed at the conference, no doubt. This would be the understatement of the century for our show, but I'm going to say it anyway. 2016 election was somewhat unconventional.
I heard that. Yeah, lived through a bit of it too. 4 a.m. in the morning or so, election night.
But, yeah, we were all up, you know, that night for sure. What are some lessons learned? I know it's still early, but let me ask differently. How will you shape the areas that you're going to research in 2017 and bring focus and attention to based on what you just witnessed the last 30 days?
Well, I'm glad you focused it in the second one, because we've learned so much about so many different things and about the nation over the last, I think, month. A lot of the things that were cemented as ideas or outcomes have been brewing for a long time. But I always view history as a part of a continuum, as an arc. You know, there are moments when it feels like the planet bends on its axis just a little bit or takes a bump, but then keeps on turning. You know, we've been through some really intense abruptions in the last century, which I hear about, you know, at the family celebrations, a lot of different presidencies, a lot of different Congresses, a lot of different disasters, wars. And my sense is that a lot of the issues are going to be the same as they've been for the past 240 odd years. You know, can this form of representative democracy endure? Can our checks and balances, our judiciary, our system of federalism, our Congress, our legislatures, our local elected officials, all meet the demands of a public that's going through the same immense, truly disruptive, in the real sense of the word, experience of a lifetime? You know, we are living in the future every day, and it is an extraordinary moment. We're doing that right now. And so government living in this now moment, in this everyone connected to the same thing, is different. And I think governing is different, campaigns are different, politics are different. Everything's been subtly shifted by the you know, technological change that we're experiencing. That's one of the reasons I put Digifile in my Twitter title back 10 years ago, because it felt like something to like, right, to have a good feeling for. I think I've had second thoughts a bunch of times in this last decade, because we've passed uncanny valleys and kept right on going, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And continue to. And I don't know what a Trump presidency is going to mean. A lot of people are thinking about that. I can tell you the issues that I was going to focus on in open government were the exact same one under Clinton presidency. It's just a different administration doing it. There are some differences from that scenario. Instead of having a Republican Congress and Clinton in the White House, and her putting someone on the court, now we've got Republican unified government. So you're going to get different decisions in the court. You're going to get a lot more legislation coming out of Congress, which will get signed within the first 100 days for real, just like in 2009. So they'll put their stamp on the country, and then maybe in the next 6 years, the country will spend that much time trying to repeal and undo it. You know, my sense is that the context of a Trump presidency to open government is different than that of Clinton, though. I mean, her campaign was within the norms of transparency. She was made the most transparent candidate in history between the FOIA's FBI investigations and, of course, WikiLeaks posting hacks. Trump was the least transparent in modern history. And, you know, the transition isn't getting much better with press access, and he hasn't had a press conference, which is historic, blows a historic norm already. And I have no idea what his stance is going to be towards lots of these issues. I have a lot of confidence in the Congress in where it stands in these issues because they've been very clear about it in the last 4 years. And frankly, the last 4 years before that. And I think that there are legitimate conflict of interest questions that are being raised by both sides of the party and both sides of the Hill that are going to have to get resolved in serious ways. And that's what we're focused on now. First, everything else involved in open government and sunshine laws and accountability and press freedom, technology and government, all the things that Sunlight has fought for are a little bit secondary to me right now, but not to what everyone else here is doing, because we have lots of things we're working on.
No. Hey, Alex, this is great. Real quick, who are your mentors? Who do you look up to? And then we've got to wrap up. We're running short on time. So
Sure. I had some wonderful teachers in high school who taught me how to think, learn, read, write, you know, to be a good human.
Where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to high school?
Germantown Friends in Philadelphia, a little Quaker school. Peter Renke really set me in a good path. Don Kawash, too. In college, I had some wonderful professors. My biology professors were wonderful. Herb Fekete was fantastic. And, you know, since I graduated, I've done a lot of different things. People have meant a lot of different things to me. You know, Peggy Rouse, who gave me a start in 2006 at whatis.com and TechTarget. Way back when. Tim O'Reilly certainly has had an influence and impact upon me. You know, I've been privileged to work with a lot of other people. I would say that the things I work on now, the person I look up to the most is Carl Malamud. I'm in awe of the work he's done and the commitment he showed over the years, and I keep trying to learn from him. And I'm grateful to know a lot of other people. Like, again, like I feel like I'm contributing to, you know, an edifice that has been built in important ways now for decades and decades, and I'm proud to learn from people about it.
Wow, we are so lucky to have you here today, Alex. Alex Howard, Senior Analyst, Sunlight Foundation. Follow him at Digifile, and more importantly, keep track of what's going on with the campaign, what's going on with the post-election, and the pre-inauguration festivities all the way out in terms of what's happening in terms of our government. Please follow Alex Howard, and more importantly, we'd love to get you on again and talk about the DC tech scene and other things that are happening. So
sure, thanks, Ray.
Thanks a lot, man.
Again.
Happy Friday.
Goodbye.
Awesome. So, wow. So we've got our next guest coming up, and another person with a Philly background. Maybe today's Philly week. Yeah. So, Bala, the honors.
What an honor to have Dr. Janice Presser, CEO of Gabriel Institute. Dr. J, I'm going to affectionately go on and say Dr. J, behavioral scientist and architect of technology that powers team ability. Dr. J has studied team interactions in academics, clinical, and business settings for over 40 years. She started when she was 5 and has shared her experience in the areas of HR metrics, measurements, workforce planning, human capital assessment. Dr. J is the author of 7 books, most recently, Timing Isn't Everything, Teaming Is. And you can follow Dr. J on Twitter at Dr. Janice, Janice. Welcome to DisrupTV, Dr. Janice. Dr. J.
Hi, guys.
Happy Friday. Welcome.
Oh, my God, right. You know, I'm originally a New Yorker, but I love Philly.
Fantastic. Are you working on your 8th book before we start?
No, the 7th one.
Seventh one, okay.
The 7th one is now supposed to be out in February. And I understand that the foreword was written by the incredibly fabulous Ray Wang.
Ah,
So, you know, there's a little digital, there's a lot of teaming. No, there's a lot of digital because we're teaming in a totally digital world. I mean, you know, what does your team look like? We're all remote from each other and we're teaming.
That's amazing. You have a best-selling author writing a foreword for your, I'm sure, best-selling book to be. That's terrific.
Hey, you know, it's good to have friends.
well, hey, this is a really good thing, and I got a note here that says, hey, for best practice, your headset sounds really clear. So just for anyone out there who gets on our show next time, this is definitely a very clear. You sound great. So hey, where's teamability coming from, right? I mean, start with a 60-second summary. I mean, we're all believers on this end, but for those who don't understand why, how did it get started? Like, why should they even think about teamability?
God, I've been thinking about it for a really long time. So everybody was looking at data. They were looking at personality traits. They were looking at IQ scales. And that wasn't what we wanted to look at. And that's me and my team. So think about this differently. When we interact with each other, we can be very transactional. But if we think of the team itself as a living, breathing thing, this big thing, bigger than any of us, what I wanted to measure was how do we interact with it? What's going on in the white spaces on the org chart? Because that answers a whole lot of other questions. And then it opens up a whole new opportunity for then, if you understand how you team and you understand how everyone on your team does. And when I say team, I mean make really meaningful contributions to that big abstract thing we call the team, then I can understand you better in the context of how you interact, how I interact, and then what goes on between us. And that means I can predict what you're going to do for our mutual team. So then you can roll out all of the management science of teaming, which is the whole other application part of teamability. Teamability itself being a technology. But so that stuff, just looking at, parts and pieces of people didn't work. We turned to physics and systems theory, and then it was just, let's say 9+ years to develop the technology. I'm the architect. I'm not a stupid architect or a slow one. It just takes that much time when you're developing something new. And so
how many data samples, like how many people have gone through teamability?
Oh God, tens of thousands, and that I can think of, or that I know of. We're in a number of iterations, of course, and the latest one is not that old. Now we've moved to not just looking at an individual. I mean, it's an online experience. It's fun. You actually get to act in movies. You get to star in a series of 10 movies, because movies are just like project teams. It's the way we work, right? There's a beginning, there's an end. We get together and we do something. And it doesn't make any difference if we're going to the moon or finding true love, because, what's business? It's just a series of problems and we come together and we solve them. And so it elicits how you team from you. And then the magic happens. Now, I wrote my first line of code when I was in high school. I'm not going to give the year on air because it was a long time ago, but it was for the digifiles, the old digifiles. It was in machine language on an IBM 650. So when you know those little silicon-based life forms, and how they interact, you can imagine something that isn't dependent on the way that the standard products were put together. And so it's in a completely new category. And then you can take all of this very rich information about a person and then look at it in the context of the team, do a team analysis, and then, for a little excitement, generate a specific playbook for any manager, leader, call them what you want, executive, that is specific to them and how they team and the individuals who are reporting to them. So, you and I could be, all of us, 3 of us could be running exactly the same team, but because we team differently, we lead differently, our playbooks would be completely different. And yet, when we're done actually practicing on our own people and being successful, we will all be better at leading the way we are. You know, as opposed to buying one of the, out of 50 bazillion books you can get off of Amazon, all called leadership, because it's not generic. And teaming's not generic, and people aren't generic, and
Exactly.
even silicon-based life forms aren't really generic.
So, Dr. J, give us a look under the hood. As you create these custom playbooks for leaders, going through that process, what are you actually measuring so that you can create this best fit playbook that varies based on who you are?
Okay, well, first, I can't take the credit. It's my babies, my little silicon babies, that are doing the heavy lifting. But I do, you know, pretty them up when they're done. So there's three important things to know about somebody. One is, in what way do they make that meaningful contribution? It turns out that it does not matter what you're doing. You could be a Fortune 10, huge global company. You could be a scout troop. You could be a church. You could be a startup in the garage. Doesn't matter. All organizations have the same 10 needs, but there aren't just 10 kinds of people. There are just 10 needs. If you know which general area somebody is drawn to make meaningful contribution in, that's one. But there's more. Second thing you want to know is, under what circumstances does somebody do their best? So for perfect comparison, there is the crazy world of the startup. Not that you guys know anything about startups, right? Right. And I myself, this is not my first, you know, we're a little crazy, right?
Yes.
We're what other people call stress, we call excitement, right? We call it fun. We call it, it's the way we live. And doesn't make us better or worse than other people. It just means put us in that kind of environment and we are going to have fun, fun, fun. We're going to be excited all the time. We're going to be engaged. We are going to be passionate about what we do. But if you put us in a job like, oh, my first job, it was for a government agency. No kidding. I was so bored. I became a union organizer. I mean, I had to do something with my excess energy. And of course, I was, even though I was 21, you know, you're born in your way for most people, and you really want to do it. So you need to get somebody matched up with the right thing. That's straight out of physics. That's actually the measure of coherence. And then the third big thing are teaming characteristics.
Yep.
And there are tens of thousands of them. Some are important, some aren't. But the big thing is they're all contextual. So that, for instance, what works well as for somebody managing in a very up close and personal way, you can think, oh, I don't know, my nightmare job, a supervisor in a call center. I'd be terrible at it. But leading at a distance, I love it. And in the digital world, you know, our tech teams particularly can be in, you know, 10 different time zones. So you better have a leader who loves to lead people in a distant way and still gets them activated. So you put all that together and you have a picture, not just of how an individual is, but how they will be meeting the needs of the team that you're on together. Make sense?
It does. It
Well,
does.
it does. I mean, it's important to have that level of continuity and get people together for that. But let me ask you this. I mean, there's these things really about, you know, people think that teamability might be like a Myers-Briggs or a StrengthsFinder or a Match.com for, you know, individuals. I mean, what makes this different, right? I mean, do you care about religion or culture or gender base, but, you know, or, you know, how people are, you know, what type of organizations people in? Does it matter? Or do you get to the core of a human?
It's at the core. It's totally at the core. By the way, you know, it's not Match.com. It actually works pretty well for that. That's in the pipeline, but we've tested it. It's really pretty interesting. Once you've got the hot attraction stuff out of the way, if you want to know how to actually work together and have a long marriage, well, that can help. So it's very different. All of those examples look at one slice of a person, lots of different ones maybe. Myers-Briggs, 4 things, the big 5, as they call them, 5 things. Match asks a whole lot of questions, and but they're basically discrete things about a person. But in fact, when we interact as whole people.
Yep.
And so that's why psychology just didn't work with this. We tried. This was not for lack of trying. Dr. Jack, my cohort in developing all the underlying theory and everything, tried. We tried for a very long time trying to figure out what's the magic combination. It turns out that isn't it. This is a very physical thing. Physical as in physics, as in real, how we interact. And of course, at the beginning, we didn't just test. We did, of course, when we tested, we wanted to make sure we were being fair. We not only looked at race and gender, which being US based, we did, but we also looked at 2 other things. We looked at age. That was extremely important to some of us. And because, many people are out of work at insert the age that HR won't look at your resume anymore. And we wanted to know, does this affect anything? It actually does not. There are many people who are, let's say, on their birth certificate, it has them at 1 number. But you guys know me. I'm digitally, I think 22 this year. I've grown up since last year when I decided I wanted to be digitally 21, so at least I could be naughty online. So that doesn't matter. And we were very, very lucky in our original group. We had some global companies. We even had a Tibetan in, if you like diversity, I have to like that, in our original group. And you know what? Your nationality does not matter. Now, in one country or another, you're going to have, let's just say, sanctioned ways to behave and ways that you should probably not misbehave. And you're smart enough to know that. But when you look at it from the perspective of the team itself, this living, breathing thing, it does not care what you look like, how you dress, how you worship, who you love, or anything like that. It does not matter. And so if you really want to have the best kind of teams, you can forget about trying to get balance. If you just fish in a pond that has all kinds of fish, you will, at least by chance, unless you screen them out when you meet them, you will have exactly what you want, a team that meets the big team's needs and gets it to its mission.
That's great. We just did research with about 7,000 consumer and business-to-business buyers around the globe, trying to better understand buying behaviors and how individuals connect with brands and companies. And the 3 pillars that came out of this connected customer research spoke to personalization, immediacy, and intelligence. Whether you're a B2B, whether you're a business buyer or a consumer, you expect engagements to be fast and high value and personalized. Well, that same concepts and principles come to employees building great companies, whether it's a startup or enterprise. But there are folks that are obstacles or can be obstacles when you're trying to digitally transform your business. How does Teamability help identify potential obstacles that exist so that you can maintain that velocity, speed, and direction that you need to compete and win in this economy?
I'm so glad you brought up that consumer research, Vala, because that's really important. When you're looking at a very large field of people to look at kind of a discrete behavior, that is, will they buy or not, then you don't have to hone in on any one person. You're looking at kind of the average. That's very different when you're trying to do anything in the transformation field, digital or otherwise. Whatever you're trying to do to get things working better, you really need to be looking at the individual. And so by looking at the person in contrast or in opposition to the needs of the team, you're going to know immediately. And when we do a team analysis, we actually put people on a chart and we mark, this is what the team needs. And the people who don't fit on the team, they don't have a purpose for being there. So they're going to be disruptive and not in a good way. Just like I was when I was bored and became a union organizer. They were not happy about that. But that was just because.
And in which book? And in which book will we hear about that?
Never. Oh, yeah. I don't think there's anyone alive who remembers some of the things I did. But someday I might talk about it. Then maybe at the next Constellation Connected Enterprise 2017, I'll be there. I hope you'll all be there who are listening. So, yeah. But what you're looking for is, does this person have a purpose on this team that they can actually fulfill? Because if you have designed the team well, then why on earth would you want to assign someone to it who's not going to contribute to it? Especially if you've got a need in another part of your organization where this person is going to do great. Another thing that sometimes happens is that jobs get designed in such a way that nobody can do them really well. So for instance, in a very, very, very large company that I love dearly, so I'm not going to say their name, had a very, very key job. Essentially, when I looked at the job, I said, oh my God, you're looking for 4 people in one. Now that doesn't exist, really. So what you have are people who have 4 very important things to do. And so they do the one that they're the best at. The problem is then, of course, if you expect them to do the other 3, they don't do as well. Stop scratching your head. Let's just redesign this and say, this is really 4 jobs. Some people might do too well, but the best thing is let the first person do the first thing. And when it's time to switch that client over to the next big need, let them say to their client, you are so important to me that I want you to have the absolute best person in our entire company to be doing exactly what you need. Meet my colleague. Bring them in, maintain the relationship. And what have you got? You have an organization that works really well, and that's true in most companies, especially in consulting. Or I say, even in the world of analysts. People who are great analysts might not be great at sales. Well,
you got to figure out what you're good at, right? And really focus on that. So.
And it's so easy. And as the leader, as the CEO, especially if you're inheriting people, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, whatever you're doing, go in with some pre-knowledge. That's why a lot of companies are using the playbook as the onboarding gift.
Wow.
Because, you've got a new team. Isn't it cool to go in on day one and already have kind of a picture of the who's who on this team, so that when you actually meet them, you don't make any of those little oops, bad mistake and hard to recover from? Because an essential part of just life and great management is respecting people for the way that they contribute to your team.
Sure.
Now, if you know how that is, you can go right in, and from the first minute you meet them, you can follow one of those little custom suggestions and go in with exactly the right words.
So Dr. Janice, it's definitely a very important technology, especially as we're trying to humanize digital. I think it's one of those areas that people are definitely seeing a need to. You know, we always talk about how people are a differentiator. The processes can all be the same. They're all pretty much standardized. You know, if you think about, you know, a lot of the products, there's not much differentiation there, but it really comes down to how you bring people together towards a purpose. We are running out of time, Dr. Janice. There's tons of stuff we could be talking about.
I love it.
You have a new book coming out. When is that book coming out?
February, might be the 14th.
Awesome.
Right, just in time for Valentine's. Look at that. Well, hey, follow Dr. Janice if you want to know more about teaming, how to improve your organizations, how to get into the science and the technology of improving your teams, making them high performing, more importantly, humanizing the digital process for those of us doing digital transformation. You can follow her at Dr. Janice on Twitter.
Ray, team well and prosper.
All right. How we do that.
Bye, guys.
All right, thanks a lot.
That was our first Star Trek reference in 40 shows. Well, we have our what I call the cleanup hitter after our next guest. We bring world-renowned experts to you on Fridays, and here's where you're going to see a grand slam. Alan Lepofsky, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research with over 2 decades of experience in the collaboration software industry. Alan helps organizations improve the way employees work and get their jobs done. His primary research is future of work, focusing on integrating collaboration, business processes, structuring work via social talent management, leveraging analytics, digital assistants, and so much more. The most important thing you need to know about Alan is he's the only other co-host to DisrupTV than Ray and I, and he crushed it. In fact, I had to go back to the drawing board to step up my game. So we welcome Alan to DisrupTV. Please follow Alan in terms of future of work collaboration software enterprise at Alan Lepo, ALANLEPO, ALANLEPO. Welcome, Alan.
Hi, Vala. Hi, Ray. Thank you. As always, a very nice introduction. If I was a host and a guest, so if you two keep quiet, do I just interview myself today? Is that the way this works?
Well, actually, that's what it was. We're going to go leave. I was going to get lunch. I haven't had early lunch in like 40 Fridays. So I figured, we let you go. No, on a serious note, you are one of the leading experts now on how creativity meets personal productivity, how artificial intelligence augments humanity. And so let's talk about what's been happening. You got to attend and you were part of something very special a few weeks ago at Adobe Max, right? And Adobe Max, that's the creativity show. How does that tie back to the enterprise? People are probably like, why are we talking about this?
Let's go to an art show, exactly.
Well, it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite shows, other than Dreamforce, but I love Adobe Max. I walk out of there and I'm like, wow, I could do that? Wait, you can Photoshop that? You mean I can change and edit this way? So I walk out of that show always re-energized, and you got a chance to go there. Tell me what's changing in terms of work, productivity, creativity meets personal productivity.
No, you're right. And I guess on the conferences, Ray, I guess it has to go Constellation, Connected Enterprise, Dreamforce, and then Adobe Max. Is that the way it goes?
I'm okay with that order.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. For those that follow me, I kind of focus on collaboration tools, on the things employees use to work together. And you think of, the emails and group messaging and file sharing and things. And to go to an event like Adobe Max, where you're focused on creative individuals, people that are creating art, people that are creating music, people that are creating, movies, it was extremely invigorating. And, over 3 days, I learned a ton. But I want to read something that happened in the first 30 seconds at the very start of the keynote. Their CEO said things like, we're here to talk about the power of creativity, connection to the human experience, color, surprise, joy, laughter. These aren't words that I hear at an IBM, Microsoft, Google, even, Salesforce sort of event in the collaboration space. And he summarized the end of his talk with things that make people remember the moment. And I really started thinking about, we struggle so much with collaboration tools. We always hear year after year, whatever the new tool is, how do we get people to use it? What's the adoption rate? How do we move from email to messaging? How do we move from our hard drives to file sharing in the cloud? How do we move from Post-it notes to task management tools, whatever it happens to be. We always struggle with adoption. And you and I were talking about it after the event. I started thinking about the fact that these creative people, music, video, images, they don't have that. Every time there's a new thing, they jump at it. They want to use the newest tool because it completely enhances the way that they can share their story. So I started thinking about those two things. How do we mix creativity and personal productivity? And how do we change from creating content to creating stories? And I think that's going to be a big part of the future of work, not just for video producers or graphic artists, but imagine if you were able to actually like or appreciate an email or a chat message or when was the last time you walked away going, wow, that was a gorgeous meeting invitation?
No. I was like, it's like,
we do create really pretty wedding invitations and invitations to other events. Why don't we have that level of joy, empathy, creativity, interaction in the tools we use as employees every day? And I think that's something that is going to be really interesting moving forward.
So Alan, tomorrow you're a CMO of a company. Who are you hiring? Your first 2, 3, 4 hires? Is one of them a super creative, beautiful colors, emotive, talent that comes in and just packages all of your content and communication and engagement models to be memorable?
It's a fantastic question. Think about what people do today. The CMOs are so focused on their customers. Let's build beautiful websites. Let's have engaging bots. Let's have marketing campaigns that send out gorgeous content that entice prospects to buy from us. But when have they ever done that similar type of thing for their employees? When have they ever had that graphic artist craft, like I said, really beautiful invites to meetings? We're starting to see things like in new group chat clients, the use of like much more fun emoji and, oh my God, animated GIFs are back. It's killing. It's like 1980 again in my stream. But it's really interesting. Even here internally, with our colleagues yesterday, right? We had a very funny, for a birthday, we were all wishing each other happy birthdays, and we were using emoticons. And one of our colleagues said, hey, let's have a contest who can create the longest story using, just emoticons. And I'm thinking, hieroglyphic walls in caves, thousands of years ago. That's how we told stories. And it's interesting to see the software starting to kind of bring that back to us. On mobile devices, I find it a little bit frustrating because half the time I can't make out what the little bitty icons actually mean. Is that a smile or a cry? And we can certainly misinterpret something if we're not using the right terminology. But it's exciting. And I think it brings, God forbid, some fun to the office, and that's starting to change in tools.
Makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And one of the things, Alan, you keep talking about is really how people can be more productive, just get work done, right? And you've seen the frustration inside our organization when we add a new tool, when we try to do something in the place. It's friction that's in play. How do you remove that?
So the biggest barrier to adoption of any piece of software is status quo. It's very, very simple. People want to keep doing what they're doing. They're used to it. They're comfortable with it. I know the keyboard shortcut commands. Why would I ever move to a different product? The buttons are different here. The first hurdle you have to get people over is the desire to change. And what causes people to change is getting more benefit out of it than effort they have to put into it. So I went to school for mechanical engineering. How do you overcome friction? You apply greater force in one direction than is being pushed in the other direction, and then something moves. So we have to do the same thing with employees. You can't just say, we've got this great new tool, go off and use it. You have to say, this is the use case you're going to use it for. And not only this is the use case, but this is what you're going to get out of it. And over the time that I've been working on collaboration tools, I think probably the most unintuitive thing that I've kind of discovered is, in order to get people to use commonly shared like collaboration tools, you actually have to tell them what it's in it for them, not for everybody. We think social, we think group, company, openness, transparency, kumbaya. Well, it's all BS. We have to focus on the individual. And once you can convince a person why they will benefit, they will then go in. So let's think of something as simple as moving out of email to a chat client. Organizations shouldn't be pitching, oh, your company is going to become more open and transparent, and all your employees are going to have a hive mind, and you're going to have the power of every. No. Internally pitch these tools. You'll be able to get the answers to your questions faster and get your work done. And if you hit every individual and make every person see a benefit to group chat clients or file sharing, then they are going to in turn be on that tool and can help others. The first time you realize somebody helped you, if I go on and ask, does anybody here know how to translate this into French? And Bala comes back and gives me an answer, I'm gonna go, wow, that tool worked. But it worked for me. I didn't say, ooh, did our company increase the bottom line? People are people go to work to get their jobs done. And I think it's really interesting that we have to focus, and that's where this creativity comes in. Imagine people being able to have these wonderful experiences instead of dreadful experiences. We talk a lot about the changing look of tools. We've been hearing about tools like Slack or Microsoft added new emoticons. I'm glad to see software vendors making the tools look better. But I'm talking about us as content producers. And companies like Adobe are doing some really interesting things. You don't have to be a graphic artist anymore to use Adobe Spark. I can take a photo with my phone, overlay some graphics on top of it, add a little pie chart, and boom, I've got something that looks 70% as nice as a professional artist would do, but done in 1% of the time. You're definitely going to need those creative professionals at the end of the result, to do, very, very significant things. But I think it will become a lot more enjoyable if we can all make our documents look better, our emails look better, our tweets look better, whatever it happens to be. I'm really interested to see how creativity is going to help us all. That's
terrific. Okay, so it's December. This is going to be the month of predictions for analysts to come on DisrupTV. When you think about 2017, what are some of the technologies that you think will have maybe the fastest adoption? And let's focus maybe on the enterprise. And things from AI, chatbots, messaging apps, AR, VR, whatever, creatives, whatever you think makes sense. Where are you going to spend most of your time tracking adoption and technology in the upcoming year?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think, we have to start with sort of the obvious. In the industry right now, the buzzword is everything about artificial intelligence. Where I differ from that is, let's take artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, machine learning, whatever the terminology you want to use, out of the equation for a moment, because to the end user, all it means is assistance. So I keep using the word assistance. If the tools can help me do things, starting with the lowest hanging fruit, if they can help me schedule meetings better, if they can help me craft emails that are read more accurately, if they can recommend content to me, if they can tell me who to connect with. We're all living in this Siri, Google Now, Cortana sort of world where we trust these tools to give us answers back in our personal lives. Like, when was the last time, do you have any idea what weather app is installed on your phone? I don't. I say, like, Google Now, what's the forecast today? I don't know if it's going to the Weather Channel or Yahoo, or Google owns, their own satellites. I have no idea where that data is coming from, but we trust these devices to give us information back. We need to get to that place in the business world, and we're not quite ready for it yet. The vendor pitches are certainly farther advanced than the end users are ready for. Email's 20 years old, and don't we still check our spam filter once a week just to make sure there's not wrong stuff in there? I think we're a little ways off from completely trusting AI to respond to emails for us or, answer questions. But what they can do is make extremely relevant recommendations. The machines can look at such larger amounts of data and then find patterns and then return suggestions to us. But I still think we're gonna, for the next few years, be at the suggestion stage.
Yeah.
Rather than, one of my sales reps emailing me and asking for, what's the latest number that you can do, and are you available, and what content you got. My email client's not going to answer that automatically for me in the next year or two. But what it can do is it can gather all of the answers for me and kind of pre-assemble a response for me. So AI is certainly going to be one. I hate to be, kind of jump on that bandwagon.
Sure. Go ahead.
I think Ray's going to cut me off. We're doing a second, but why don't we leave it at that?
Do your second. Other than telling me that Google tell Siri that Alexa, I need to get that out of my cart, and since I can't do it by voice, can someone do that on the web for me?
Okay, so let's.
Listen, I read the latest Harvard Business Review blog by Ray describing the new experience in the hospital powered by AI. And it was all about assistance along the way, moving from the perception part of the outcome to contextual intelligence. And I can see that absolutely in the workplace.
Well, I think, you actually, I owe you $1 here. I'm not sure American or Canadian, but you just segued me to what I would say for number 2 is I really think a lot of vendors are working on improving context. I deal with a lot of, from you guys at Salesforce to Microsoft to Google to startups. We are drowning in information, not just from a single tool. So we have what's called information overload, but we also have what I call input overload. We are using too many tools. And so I think a trend we're going to start to see is these aggregations of information that will provide more context to what we're trying to accomplish. It's not going to be perfect yet, but how do I link this calendar entry to this chat message to this airplane ticket? Things that aren't being linked together today. I think we're going to start to see a lot of work on improving the context. If anybody goes to, Alan Lepo on Twitter, you'll actually see that my pinned tweet is sort of talking about this concept of a lack of context, not only within one vendor's profile, but across, it's even more chaotic if you're trying to get context across multiple tools. And I'm doing a lot of briefings and working with a lot of startups now that are trying to solve that. So I'll leave it at that. Context.
Very, very cool. We are here with Alan Lepofsky, one of our awesome analysts. It's probably one of our oldest analysts at Constellation, talking about
the longest, not the oldest.
with one of the most tenured, one of the most senior tenured analysts.
There's a lot of gray hair in here. I'm probably one of the oldest, yeah.
Mostly senior tenured analysts at Constellation. But hey, definitely talk about the future work, AI, and where creativity meets personal productivity. You can follow him at Alan Lepo on Twitter, and of course, check out all the cool tools that he uses when he looks at the future of work. So, Vala, this is our 40th show. I think we must have gone through 100 guests this year. 100
guests, and it's great to end with a Hall of Fame co-host, Alan. Our first Hall of Fame co-host member. Yeah, 40 guests, and next week we have our 41 episode with Bob Greenberg, who's CEO founder of G&H International Services, one of the leading thought leaders in the connected city, smart city space. Ben Haynes, Vice President of Global Information Systems at Yahoo.
One of the top CIO influencers in the world.
One of the top CIO influencers in the world. And Chris Kanarakis, Managing Editor, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. It's going to be another amazing show. Certainly Fridays fly by from 2 to 3 p.m. ET for me anyway.
And then catch us for the season finale, episode 42 of our first season. And we'll be talking a little bit about what's next. There will be a recap on December, I believe it's at 17th. No, 15th.
Yeah, and what's going to be special
16th.
is we'll be talking about, some of the guests that will be here, calendar 17. We have just an amazing roster of individuals. I would go out on a limb and say the greatest set of technology, business, innovation leaders in the world will be on DisrupTV in 2017. I want to thank you guys for watching and helping us, support the program.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, it's Friday, and please enjoy yourself. But when it's Friday, think DisrupTV, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, every Friday.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Aubrey. Bye-bye.